Hi folks, this is Vince with Dad's Gaming Addiction, and today we're going to quickly check out Sheepland. It's a board game for 2 to 4 players for ages 8 and up, with the average play time being about 30 minutes. So in this game, players assume the role of shepherds who are trying to get the most valuable land. What determines the most valuable land? Sheep, of course. So with that being said, let's just go ahead and take a quick look at the components and see how the game is played. Okay, components and game setup. I'm going to try and streamline this as best as possible. That may be a little difficult because there's a lot to cover. Well, maybe not a lot to cover, but there's a lot of information that's going to be thrown at you all at once. You've got your box insert. We'll start with that. I do have some stuff in the box just to sort of get rid of the clutter that may be on the table. And I didn't want to confuse you by having all of these components. But normally this would be out on the table. You've got coins here, and you've got fences. Speaking of coins and fences, well, here are your fences over here. You've got green ones and blue ones. These are your standard fences, and these blue ones are your end of game or final fences. Players go through these before they get to these. These sort of signal the end of the game. You've got 6 stacks of terrain tiles, and they are represented by terrain types that you'll find on the board. So here's your grassland, here's your forest, there's your mountain. So these stacks match the terrain that you'll find on the board. And you'll put them in stacks from 0 to 4. 0 on top, 4 on the bottom. And that number is how much they cost. They start out very cheap, but as you buy more of that particular terrain, it gets more and more expensive. So, in the very beginning of the game, players will be buying those for cheap. Toward the end of the game, they're going to be spending a lot of money on a particular terrain, depending on what's been purchased at that point in time. As far as the board goes, I know it looks like a lot, but you've got these sheep. There's 1 sheep per territory. That's how you set that up. You've got the black sheep here, who goes in the very center. And then each player will get 20 of these dinars. They come in different denominations, 1, 3, 5, and 10. There are these starter tiles here. There's 6 of those. And again, there's 6 different terrain types. There's 1 of each type. 1 grassland, 1 forest, 1 mountain, etc. And basically these are shuffled up and each player receives 1 as a starting terrain. That's basically what they own at that point in time. And they'll be acquiring more of these tiles throughout the game. And why are you doing this? You're probably wondering, why am I buying these tiles? Why do I want to buy these tiles? Well, your points are determined by how many sheep are on the terrain that you own at the end of the game. So you're not actually purchasing individual plots of land. You're just purchasing a type of terrain. So you're purchasing grassland, or you're purchasing mountains, and you're purchasing forests. And if you can have sheep on the terrain that you're buying at the end of the game, you'll score some points. So the goal here, let's say that I had 4 grassland tiles in my possession at the end of the game, and there were a bunch of sheep on the grassland on the board at the end of the game. I would score a lot of points for doing that. However, if I owned a bunch of grassland and all of the sheep were on, say, forests or mountains, I wouldn't score a whole heck of a lot of points, So basically, you're trying to predict where the sheep are going to end up and then purchase the tiles accordingly. So there's that. Each player will choose a starting person, and the starting player will go ahead and place their pawn onto an unoccupied road space. Now, what do I mean by unoccupied? Well, let's just go ahead and take a look at what the board looks like in closer detail. You've got different terrains here. You've got like land here, land here, land here, land here. And they're bordered by roads, and these roads have numbers on them. You've got 1, 2, 5, 4, 3, and etc. These shepherds, or the players, will be traveling on those road spaces, whereas the sheep stay on the actual land or terrain. Now, it's important to note that the box also comes with an extra blue and an extra red. And the reason for that is in a 3 or 4 player game, each player gets 1 pawn, and that's it. But in a 2-player game, each player gets 2 pawns of a color. So one player will be blue and have 2 blue pawns, and the other player will have 2 red pawns. And they can alternate between them however they like throughout the game. And I'll explain more about that later. But that's basically how you set up the game. Each player gets 20 dinars. They start off with 1 of those starter tiles here. 1 player is assigned the starting player token, and then the starting player will start putting the pawn down on an unoccupied road space, and each player will follow suit. These are put into separate stacks, 0 through 4. 0 on top, 4 on the bottom. Fences are placed nearby. The bank is placed nearby, and that should do it. Okay, so admittedly that was a mouthful. The rest of the game should be pretty easy. As far as what a player's turn looks like, the first thing a player does on their turn is they roll this die here. And this determines the movement of the black sheep. So if you roll a 3, for example, you'll take a look and see the number 3 here, and that sheep will move to the other side of it. If he happened to roll a 2, he would move to the other side of the 2 there. Or if he rolled a 6, he'd move to the 6, and etc. If you roll a number that is not available at that particular space, like over here in the corner, there's a 2, a 3, and a 1. If he rolls a 4, for example, that black sheep is not going to move. But in the center here, you know it's going to move. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It has all 6 numbers surrounding that particular space. But at the very beginning of the turn, the player is going to roll the die and move the black sheep accordingly. So if it's a 6, he moves over here. After that, the player has 3 action points that they can spend on their turn. And there's 3 different actions they can take. They can take those actions in any order. They can repeat actions, but there are some stipulations. Let's just go ahead and list the 3 actions that you can take. Move your shepherd, move 1 sheep, or buy 1 terrain tile. Now, you have to move your shepherd at least once on your turn, and if you do take the same action twice, you have to move your shepherd before taking the second action. So, for example, if you buy 2 terrain tiles on your turn, again, it's one action per purchase. So, if you're going to buy 1 terrain tile, then you move your shepherd, and then you buy your second terrain tile. Or if you want to move 2 sheep, you move 1 sheep, then you move your shepherd, then you buy the second sheep. So there are some exceptions and some stipulations with regard to what you can do with those 3 action points. So you want to take a look at the manual first before playing. But as far as moving your shepherd goes, let's go ahead and zoom in on the board so you can actually see what's going on. Now, to move your shepherd, you're going to move your pawn to an adjacent unoccupied road space. You cannot move on to another space that's occupied by a fence or occupied by another player. If you move to an adjacent space, to a connecting one, then it's free. You don't have to pay anything. However, if you move to a non-adjacent space, like if you have to move through another road space to get there, then you have to pay 1 dinar to the bank. So if you wanted to move, like, say, over here, you'd have to pay 1 dinar because you're moving through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So yeah, there's a lot of spaces that you're moving through. So there's that. And you're going to be doing that a lot toward the end of the game because after you move, you actually have to put a fence down. So if I were to move to this 4 here, 6 to 4, I'd put the fence onto the 6. The space you moved from, that's where you put these fences. So throughout the game, there's going to be more and more fences littering these road spaces. Again, the shepherds stay on the road, the sheep stay in the terrain. As far as moving 1 sheep, the way that works is you're going to pick a sheep that is, let's say this wasn't here and I was back here. The way that works is you're going to pick a sheep on either side of you and then you're going to move it to the other tile, or onto the other space. So you've got, say, this sheep here. I could move this over here if I wanted to, or I could move this sheep over to this other one. So as you can see, each number borders 2 spaces, so you're just going to put it to the other side of it. So that's another thing you could possibly do on your turn. So if you own a lot of grassland, for example, you're going to want to move sheep over to the grassland spaces and try and keep them there. So that's one strategy. And then finally, buy 1 terrain tile. You'll go ahead and spend some of your dinars that you're earning and buy these up. And then, again, they start out very cheap, but as you buy more, then they become more and more expensive. And that's pretty much all there is to it. Players will continue taking turns, and because they have to move their shepherd at least once on their turn, there's going to be fences that are going to start littering the board after players move from those locations. So just imagine a board filled with these fences, and then when these run out, again, there's more in the bag in the box, but once these run out and players start using these, that'll signal the last round, and each player gets 1 last turn so that each player has an equal number of turns. That's what the starter player token is for, so you know who started the game and how many players have to go before everyone gets an equal number of turns. But after that, the sheep are going to be all over the place, maybe, and then you've got the black sheep moving around the board throughout the process, and everything's littered with fences and the like. And at the very end of the game, what's going to happen is players are going to basically take stock of how many of these land tile or these terrain tiles they have per type, and then they're going to count up how many sheep are on that particular terrain. So let's say there's a total of 3 sheep, 3 white sheep on this farmland or this this farmland terrain. And then players will go ahead and take a look at how many they have. So that's how many points this particular terrain is worth. So if there's 3 sheep on farmland at the end of the game, then each of these is worth 3 points. So if I had 2 in my possession, 3 points, 6 points. So I would get 6 points for that terrain type. Let's say there were 4 sheep on mountains scattered. There's 2 there, 1, 2 there. Yeah. So let's say there's 4 sheep on mountains at the end of the game. So that means each mountain is worth 4 points. So if I had, say, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's 4, 8, 12, 16. So I'd have 16 points from these mountain tiles here. So again, it's beneficial if you own a lot of mountains or a lot of grass. You're going to want to try and get those sheep over to those locations. And then you're going to sum up all of your points, and the player with the most wins. Wherever the black sheep is, by the way, this is worth 2 points. So if there's, let's say, forest, for example, you've got a black sheep here, a white sheep here, and there's no other sheep anywhere on the forest tiles or on the forest spaces. But if there's 1, that's 1, and then this black is 2, so that's 3 points. So each forest would be worth 3 points. And again, players are going to add up their total score, and whoever has the most will win the game. Alright, so there you have it, a very brief look at Sheepland. It's important to stress that I did not cover all of the rules found in the manual. In fact, I was all over the place. I'm sort of in a rush, and a lot of these concepts can't be explained one after the other. A lot of things in this game sort of tie in together. So I was a little disorganized, so apologies. But hopefully this gives you a general idea and gives you, sort of a sense as to how the game plays. As far as what I thought, it's a light, casual, strategic game. I like it because I enjoy the whole... Again, I keep wanting to use the word stock. Like you're putting your money into investments, like you're investing on these terrain tiles or these terrain types. So if you invest in grassland, you're trying to then maneuver the board in such a way to where the sheep end up there. So I like the game in the sense that you can sort of plan ahead and predict, or try to predict, what's going to happen on the board, say 5 or 10 moves from now. And I like that. And you don't know what's going to happen, but if you can see what your opponents are buying, and you can take stock of what you're buying and keep it all straight and manage your turns wisely, then you can sort of come up with a strategy on how you're going to go about getting the sheep to those locations without without letting your opponent get too many points too. So there is a light strategy element here, but it's very casual. It's not on the same par as, say, Power Grid or Agricola. It's not that crazy. Even though both of those games are, family-friendly in the sense that it's not involving, like, weapons or anything like that. They're family-friendly themes. But this one is definitely lighter in terms of components, in terms of how the game is played. Flow of play is very easy. So I would recommend this game to anyone that enjoys a light strategy game. And the theme is fantastic. The components are very well done. My only complaint is the board. It's one of those foldable boards, and the board doesn't always... it sort of warps, it retains its shape even after you lay it out, so you have to fold it in the opposite direction. And I cringe every time I do that because I can hear... And I'm like, am I breaking, I'm ripping the board, and I don't want to do that. That's my only complaint, is that the board doesn't lay flat when you roll it or when you set it out. Like, that's my only complaint. If there was some way to, I don't know how, manufacturing boards work, but, if there's a way to do that, that'd be awesome. But anyway, I digress. Sheepland, definitely go check it out, and the price is pretty good too. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head, but it's like $15-20 on Amazon, somewhere around there. The price will fluctuate. So yeah, if you enjoy light strategy games, or if you're a casual gamer family that does not mind a little strategy here or there, go check this game out. It's a lot of fun. Sheepland, if you guys want to see my written review, you can, www.dadsgamingaddiction.com. If you haven't already, subscribed to my YouTube channel. That way you can keep up to date with any new content I'm going to publish. This is Vince, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.